Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to review Save South Vietnam. This is a solitaire war game of the Vietnam War where you control the US and South Vietnamese forces over the span of the entire war. Let's jump in and get started with our power review. This is going to be a pretty straightforward power review. I had a marvelous time playing this game. It is fun, it's intellectually challenging. You're playing 50 turns over the entire Vietnam conflict, and one of my concerns was like, wow, is that going to get tedious? It doesn't. The game evolves and morphs and is constantly throwing different challenges at you that you have to figure out as you fight your way through this whole conflict. Fantastic gaming experience. Another positive with the game, the rulebook. Really clear, really concise, easy to understand. No problems with the rules, which is really helpful in a solitaire war game. For negatives, I have a couple of teeny things that I'm going to mention in the detailed review, but I can say right here now there are no big negatives that I found with the game as I was playing through it. I do have a neutral comment. I think the design is very functional, but it's not necessarily captivating. Might be the right way to put it, and I'll explain more in the detailed review. Bottom line, if you like solitaire war games, this is a great game to get. Absolutely fantastic gaming experience. Now let's dig into the detailed review. Let's start out with the fun parts, and there's a lot of them. First up, you get to play an entire war. I think a solitaire game that has this scope and scale of playing an entire conflict. You start in 1965 and you end, hopefully, if you make it that far, 1977. So you're going to be fighting a big war. You're taking on the role of the US and then eventually the South Vietnamese army, and you have to fight your way through this whole conflict. Now, if Saigon falls, the war ends earlier, and that's really your win condition. Keep Saigon alive. Don't let Saigon fall. If you make it to the end of the war and Saigon hasn't fallen, you win. If that happens, you lose. So it's a very simple win-loss trigger in the game, and you're going to spend a lot of time, anxious moments, kind of wondering about the fate of your Saigon province. Other things I really like about the game. So you hear this. You hear a 50-turn game with the same sequence of play, and you think, wow, that sounds tedious, right? But it's not. One of the other brilliant aspects of the game is the way the game morphs as you play deeper into the conflict. So you start out in the early years and you've got this kind of insurgence of North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces, and you've got a very small US army that's trying to hold them back. So the first couple of years, you're literally scrambling. While the US military is building up and you're bringing more forces into the country, you're trying frantically not to lose Saigon in the early couple years of the war. Then your military forces get pretty strong and you're thinking, okay, we're in better shape here. Boom, Tet Offensive. Now you've got a huge military offensive against you as the US forces, and it's up to the US military to be able to fight back against the Tet Offensive. So that's kind of that second stage, if you would, of the game. Once the Tet Offensive ends, you're now faced with the US withdrawal. The gradual withdrawal starts, and you're faced with your big challenge of the game. In this game, you actually build up the entire South Vietnamese army. Again, hopefully. If you don't do that, you're going to lose. But the idea, as the US forces are withdrawing, you're still getting under a lot of pressure from the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. And now your next challenge in this kind of mid-game is how to build up and successfully maintain the South Vietnamese army. Now, as the game progresses, suddenly you're looking at a situation where all the US forces are gone, and you've got your fledgling South Vietnamese army that's frantically trying to survive for the rest of the war. That's only the back half of the game, if you would. So your army starts to get built up, and you're like, okay, we got things stable. But the fun hasn't ended yet, because you get two offensives, the Easter offensive and the Spring offensive. And the last Spring offensive is a massive, basically the entire North Vietnamese army is in South Vietnam, and all you've got to stop them is the South Vietnamese army. So if you would, there's kind of these 4 or 5 stages that you play through as you kind of make your way through the game. And each one of those stages presents its own unique challenges. So you think you got it down a third of the way through the game, and you're like, okay, I feel like we're doing pretty good. Now the US forces are gone, and you got to fight as a South Vietnamese army. So now your challenges are completely different. I loved how the game morphed as you played through it, how it never got tedious. I don't want to say there are 5 mini games or 4 mini games, however you want to break it down, because that's not how it feels. One kind of gradually ebbs and flows into the next sequence, and you just realize, okay, wow, now the game's completely different, and my challenges are different. So I just had a marvelous time kind of thinking through the different challenges that each stage of the game throws at you. Just so much fun to play, and for a 50-turn game that covers the entire Vietnam conflict, there's not a moment where you feel like, another turn of the same thing. It's always morphing into something new, fun, and challenging. So I loved that part of it too. Another big plus for me, this is, and I mentioned this, that you build up the South Vietnam Army. I found that mechanic really cool. You've got, as you start the game, you've got a pile of South Vietnamese army forces, your ARVN forces, and they're not on the map, they don't exist. And there's a political model in the game, which is another cool part of the game. You've got to kind of capture the political will of each one of these provinces. And depending on how well you do at that, you're going to either have a harder time controlling it because more Viet Cong forces are going to come in, or you're going to have an easier time controlling it, eventually getting to the point where you can build up a police force. And then from that police force, you can start to draw these South Vietnamese army units, which eventually become your entire military. The concept of playing a game where you literally build an army by shifting political will into a police force, into a military force, that at the end of the game, this army that didn't exist in 1965 is now, hopefully, successfully defending your country against an entire North Vietnamese offensive. That's just cool. I mean, games where you get to build things and construct things, there's a lot of reasons why people play games. I love games where you get to build things, whether it's a base or it's a fortress or building up a character like in a role-playing game or something like this. I don't think I've played a game where you get to build an army like this. It's really novel, it's really fun, and it's really well executed. You feel really cool by the end because you've got these, 20 units, 30 units, however many it is. Like, we built this army. And it's defending the country, if you win again. But so that's just real. I found that whole mechanic, that whole flow, it's so rewarding, so unique, so creative, and so well executed that I love that part of the game. When you get into that back half and now you're building it, you're like, okay, we got more of our units. Okay, we're pulling in the 33rd Brigade. Cool, we just built it. Now we got to get it up to full strength. I can go on, I can gush for a while. I'm kind of getting a little bit redundant, but I really like that part of the game too. I want to talk a little bit about the rules too, because I think they're a big plus with the game. There's literally nothing that I needed to go outside of the rule book to solve. All the edge cases are covered. Everything is really clear. If you read the rules carefully, you're going to have no problem executing the game at all. I would also add too, it's not a simple and shallow game, but the rules and the mechanics aren't overly complex. If I were going to give this a complexity rating on like a 3 to 9 scale, I give it a 3. It's not that hard. You're not going to have to play that long before you start to realize, oh no, I'm playing correctly. I got this down. So big thumbs up to the rules. It covers everything, very clear. It's always greatly appreciated when you feel like you're jumping into a game and you can play with confidence because the rules are just rock solid. So big thumbs up there, and I appreciate the really good rule set. I want to talk a little bit about depth. I think the game has a lot of depth and replayability. First of all, I think it's going to take a few times that you play where you're going to probably make some critical mistakes that are going to lead to a less than desirable end state, and you're gonna be like, oh, okay, I get it now. There's certain things you just have to kind of learn how to do, like handle the Tet Offensive, handle that initial wave of North Vietnamese and political cadre action, how you're gonna kind of handle the withdrawal, how you're gonna handle the South Vietnamese buildup, those offensives, and I think it's really easy in there to kind of make some critical mistakes that are gonna lead you to say, okay, I gotta figure out how to do this, let's try again, kind of thing like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it takes multiple playthroughs before you can get to a state where you beat the game. Having said that, I don't think it's not a game that you're going to play 100 times before you win. It's not one of the super difficult solitaire games where the odds are stacked against you. I think if you play well, I think you have a very good chance of beating the game. But even having said that, because of the nature, each year you get a variable amount of political cadres from the North Vietnamese and North Vietnamese Army brigades, and it's a great variety as to where they show up, so that I feel like each game is going to play out quite differently. Sometimes you might get an evenly distributed North Vietnamese offensive and political influence evenly distributed throughout the country. Other times you're going to get it concentrated in certain provinces, and depending on where those provinces are, they're going to present different challenges to you. So I feel like each time you play the game, it's going to play out quite a bit differently, and it's going to present itself as a different type of story. So it's not definitely something that you play once and then you're done once you figure out how to beat it. I feel like there's a lot of legs left after that, and getting to that win state is probably going to take a while. Again, going back to the idea that each playthrough is probably 4 to 6 hours if you get to the end of the game kind of thing. So there's a lot of mileage in here. I think you're going to be able to spend time with this game, before you get to a point and say, yeah, okay, I've played through this. So, because I know I definitely want to go back now, see if we can win without losing a single province, and see if I can win a second time, because I feel like there were some places in the first winter that we were a little bit lucky in some key battles that went our way, and had they shifted, it might have been a different outcome. So I'm very curious to play the game again. I'm definitely eager to play it, and plus it's fun to play. Even when you win, it's not easy. Fun to play. It's a great system. There's a rhythm to it as you get into it. So it's just an enjoyable experience that I think has a lot of depth. One of the other elements I liked about the game is the political modeling. So you've got not only the military conflict, you've got these political cadres that come in from the North Vietnamese and influence the region. Not only that, another interesting aspect is that U.S. military forces on the ground also tend to shift political opinion towards the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong. So you're not only are you fighting the military conflict in Vietnam, you also have a political stratosphere to be able to handle. And managing that political stratosphere is so important to success, because if provinces get out of hand politically, things just go from bad to worse right away. So I really like that influence of the military aspect of the war and the political layer of the war, and how they blend together and impact each other. It creates kind of, again, that depth of play, the challenge of play that I think is really unique to this game. Well, not unique to this game. There's other games, coin games have political influences. It's modeled very differently here. But that weaving and interplay of politics and military I thought was a really fun element of this game. I'd like to talk about a couple of what I feel like are neutral aspects of the game. I feel like the design, I want to talk about the design first. The design, again, design is two parts, right? It's function and really kind of that artistic capacity of the game to just pull you into the action. From a form perspective, I feel like the game works really well. I do wish there were a chart on the map of the US and South Vietnamese loss priority. I felt like I had to dive into the rules quite often for that. It would have been nice to have that on the board somewhere, or a little playing aid card or something like that. But other than that, I felt like the game was really easy to play and manage from a form perspective. Once you get into a rhythm, turns go really fast. You're working through each stage well. And as a management system, it works really well. I like the step system for the US units. Most of the U.S. brigades have 2 counters. So you have the 0 step loss and the 1 step loss counter on one side, then the 2 step and the 3 step. So you are switching units in and out. When a U.S. unit goes from 1 step loss to 2 step losses, you got to switch the counters off to the side of the map and stuff like that. But it works really well. It flows really smoothly. I never felt like I was out of control or kind of lost control of the function. Really, from a functional standpoint, I think the game works really, really well. I will say that I think from an artistic design capacity, some people put some comments down below saying there were certain things they didn't like about the design. I don't go that far. I actually like the U.S. military units with their unit designations and things like that. I like the big numbers on the counters, again, as a functional aspect. I'm okay with the map design and things like that. Having said all that, the gameplay is at such a high level, and I think the artistic design is at a level subtly below that. I feel like there's an incredible opportunity in this game to level up the artwork, the design, the unit design, the map design, to really take it to another level. So even though I won't say I'm fine with the design of the game and the artistic design, I do feel like I can understand comments saying I feel like there could be another leveling up of that. Really make a map that just absolutely just pulls you into the game. Units with a little bit different design, especially kind of for some of those brigade or headquarter function elements. I feel like there's potential here to really level up the design, although again, I'm not going to put it in the negative category. I don't feel like it's a negative. I'm going to go very neutral on that artistic design and positive on the functional design. The other element I want to talk about, again, from kind of a neutral perspective, is that there's a lot of things like the political states of different provinces and stuff like that kind of ebb and flow within the game. And the way you build up the South Vietnamese army kind of is largely dependent upon the player actions. You can either succeed greatly at that or you can fail greatly at that. The North Vietnamese influence into the game and the offensives are kind of set on certain triggers, although the Tet offensive has kind of some variability in there. So in terms of comparing it to the real Vietnam War, or at least in some of the elements there's certain elements that are kind of channeled, if you would, and there's certain elements that you've got quite a bit of variability on. One item that is very channeled is the U.S. buildup and the U.S. withdrawal. And as I was playing the game, so it's fixed, right? So you're going to have a specific unit that's going to come in at a specific time in the war, and then it's going to leave at a specific time in the war. And that's going to be the same every game. And from a gameplay, from a historical point of what this game is from a historical angle of what this game is trying to model, I found myself wondering, would there be a way to have the U.S. buildup and withdrawal be variable, right? So, because I feel like it's a little bit, it feels like something that should be variable, right? That it shouldn't be set in stone. Maybe depending upon the results in country, U.S. losses, the political will to continue shifts, and your withdrawal happens earlier. Or if you're having success, maybe your withdrawal happens later. Or if you're having success, maybe your withdrawal happens on a set schedule because you're having success. You don't need that many units. That I think, now, I think that would be cool. But I also want to add some very important points. This game is so finely balanced. You can obviously tell that hours and hours and hours of work got to making this system work the way it does. It's so finely tuned down to each province and its political points, to the combat, to the number of cadres that come in each year. I feel like there was incredible attention to detail to making this system be as tight and as fine as it could. And when you're designing a system like this, adding in another variable as complex as a varied U.S. buildup and withdrawal, or at least maybe perhaps a varied U.S. withdrawal is probably more realistic, a varied U.S. withdrawal would have the potential to just make the game 6 times more complex to design, build, and execute, right? So it's an easy thing to say, oh, that'd be cool, but I think from a game design perspective, that's a huge challenge because you've got to rebalance all these other systems to make them work. And depending upon that situation, it might just be a variable that either makes the game too hard or too easy. For example, say if the U.S. suffer heavy losses, maybe the U.S. withdrawal happens sooner. Well, then you've just made the game harder for the U.S. So it's from a gameplay perspective, I can see also why you might want that fixed. So that's kind of that would be kind of cool if it worked, but I wouldn't want it to work and break the balance of the game, and I wouldn't want it to work and increase the complexity or length of the game to any large degree. So I'm perfectly fine with the way it was. It was just kind of one thing that sticks out a little bit that you're like, it'd be cool if that U.S. withdrawal were variable depending upon some U.S. political home state kind of situation that could be brought to bear in the game too. But that's like a wish list, and again, I don't put it in as a negative. I put it in very much as kind of a neutral observation. I do have 2 negatives, but they're so teeny, okay? But I do want to mention them because I feel like they're there, and I did notice them. But they're so minor, right? So don't stress out. There's not a reason not to get the game, for sure, okay? First up, the political track points. It's like a half counter width. I found it really easy, and I had to keep in mind, too, I had the game up for a long time, right? So I have it up for almost 10 days, more than that, 2 weeks, really, to play the game. So it was really easy for me to nudge one of those counters to record where the political track is and not know whether it was a 1 or a 2. Fortunately for me, I have video, so I could look back at the video and say, oh, right there, okay, it was a 1, I'd get it in the right spot. But if you're not recording as you're playing, you don't have that luxury. So I feel like it would be neat if that political track could be modified in some way so that it was a full counter positioning, like the outside. Around the outside, it's a full counter positioning. I didn't have any ambiguity with that, but sometimes it was really easy for me to nudge one of those police political points, counters in a box and kind of not know where it was. So that mechanic felt a little bit like it could be tweaked maybe a little bit. The other thing was the 2 northernmost provinces, Quang Tri and Hue, on the game board. I felt like sometimes were a little too small, especially Quang Tri had a boatload of North Vietnamese and political cadres in by the end of the game. It was hard to make sure I kept all those contained. Is it in Quang Tri? Is it in Hue? Is it in the remote area? Is it in the populated area? It'd be kind of neat if those were bigger. Okay, so this is a whole game. I've played the game probably now for 10, 15 hours. Those are the only 2 negatives I've got. Okay, so again, don't freak out and don't buy the game because I mentioned those 2 things. Those are the only 2 negatives that I really found that I had with the game after all this play. So many positives about this game. This game totally surprised me. I didn't know much about it before I started to play. I must confess, I looked at it and I said, okay, the design looks pretty cool. And then you got 50 turns. It's like, wow, it's going to be a long game. I was like, it's going to be fun. And then I started playing it. It's like, wow, it just blew me away. I mean, this was so much fun. I'm making the top solitaire war games videos. I'm going to update those, and this is one of the contenders that I wanted to put in. It's going in that list, without a doubt. This is so cool, and I love the idea that you can play a whole war. So, play the whole war as a solitaire game, and its ebb and flow, and the way the game morphs and changes. I think this is just brilliant design. I've been back now at Wargaming for about 15, 16 months now, maybe a year and a half, and this has definitely been one of the highlights of my return. I absolutely love this game. I would recommend it to anybody. It's fantastic. If you like solitaire war games, it's just really, really fun. So there it is, our review of Save South Vietnam. Let me know down in the comments down below what you think. If you've played the game, I'd be curious to hear how you like it. Any thoughts you have, any questions you have, I'd also be happy to answer them as well as I can. I would also add that this system in Save South Vietnam is used and modified in Save Afghanistan Comrade, another game of similar land nature to this, and the same basic core system is used in the 8th Air Force and 20th Air Force games from Fortress Games as well. So I'm very curious to see how those play too. If you haven't seen it yet, here is a link to our full replay, after action report of Save South Vietnam, and also putting up a link to our replay with the Hunters, if you have seen the Save South Vietnam one. So thank you so much for watching. I'd be curious, drop a comment down below to let me know what you think, and thanks again for watching.